Today, I'm going to show you how to make this with something called Scene.js. Before we begin, today's video is sponsored by Milanote, which is a tool that I've featured on this channel before that I use for planning my creative projects. Now, Milanote is different than traditional software because it's more like working on a wall in a creative studio. You can use it for planning your project so that all of the info is stored in a central location. You can easily create mood boards, and all of your work can be shared with colleagues and clients with real-time collaboration. Milanote is free to try, so click on the top link here in the description of the YouTube video and give it a shot. Hey everyone, what's up? Gary Simon of Coursetro.com. So today we're gonna be checking out something called Scene.js, and really I consider it to be a GSAP competitor or an alternative. And GSAP, of course, is the green sock animation platform, and basically it allows you to create more complex animations either through your illustrations or your user interface elements, as we're about to do as well. So just to show you, the main site is daybrush.com/scene.js, and it is very cool. Basically, if you check out the examples, you can see kind of what you can do. A lot of them are illustration-based examples. So for instance, there's a CodePen demo for basically all of their examples where you can learn how to do a lot of really cool things like this. And I took a little bit of a different approach because I really like user interfaces, and I'm going to show you how to create this using Scene.js. Now also about this tutorial, it's a lengthy one, but only because I'm a UI designer as well. I really like teaching UI design, so we're going to hop into Adobe XD to show you how I would design and my thought process behind designing something like this. And then also we're going to show you the HTML, the CSS, and then finally we'll get to the actual pertinent part of this tutorial, which is covering Scene.js. So if you aren't interested in any of that stuff, I'm going to provide timestamps though for you, so where you can just get straight to the JavaScript portion, which is near the end portion of this video. But again, I like to help people as much as possible, so we're covering all that good stuff. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and let's get started. All right, so we're going to begin here in Adobe XD or Adobe Experience Design, and we're going to start just with a Web 1920. We're not going to really worry about, prototyping for responsive design or for mobile mockups or whatever. So we're going to take our background, and we're going to, I think I'm just going to use a lighter color, but it's going to have just some blue, more on the desaturated side, not this saturated side, something like that. So we'll just add this here. That's C8DAE2 for the color code for those that care. And again, we're not designing a full-on layout. It's just going to be, a particular element of a layout. So it's going to be like a container. And I'll come up here in the middle just with the rectangle tool, left click and drag, hold Alt. And I'm just going to create something that's, right around this size. All right, that looks good to me. Inside of it, well, no, first of all, let's select it, and we'll get rid of the border, and we'll give it a little bit of a border radius here. So we'll drag these in, right around there. All right, that's good. And for when it comes to designing like panels that you have that are a part of your UI design, you can approach it in multiple ways, but one way that I do like to approach it when it comes to light interfaces is to have like the background element to be much more on the lighter side. Sometimes you'll see this, like a real light gray. Nothing, there isn't a right or wrong as long as you can see that there's a panel and there's enough contrast. Like if you did this, that would be a no-go. Even though this isn't quite white, all Fs, still you can barely see it. So just so you have a decent enough contrast to where you can see that panel itself. All right, so let's take our type tool, and right here I'm just gonna have like a label, and it's just gonna say my cart. How exciting. And we're gonna make the color black here in this case, and we're gonna change things up. We're not gonna use Montserrat for that. We're just gonna use Nunito. I think that's how you pronounce it. Let's left click, drag up to make it a decent size. And notice where I'm placing it. There is an equal amount of white space on the left, top, and bottom of it. So doing something like this throws off the look immediately. Don't want to do that. Don't want to do this. And you certainly don't want to do this. So having things all evened up just makes it feel so much better when you have that padding inside of here. We're going to take this, duplicate it with Control D, and then we will specify an amount. Maybe they're buying a bunch of stuff for 455 bucks, or maybe just one thing. All right, so we're pushing it over here, and I'm maintaining that equal white space on the top, this time right, and then bottom. Looks like they're both a little bit uneven at the bottom. There we go. So another thing that we need to concern ourselves with is color and visual hierarchy. And so we have two different elements. We have a label, and then we have a value of some sort. Right now they're styled exactly the same in terms of the type. So let's take the foreground color of this element and change it up. That's just one way that you can reinforce visual hierarchy, or in other words, you prioritize certain elements or differentiate them between each other, is through color. Another, of course, is through font weight. We could change this here to bold. And now you can kind of see there's a difference between the two. I think we're going to leave it the same, and the only thing that we're going to make different is the color of it. So I'm just grabbing this initial color, and then we're just going to stay inside the same color range, but we're just going to saturate it all the way up to right around there. Yeah, maybe a little bit darker. There we go. If you go too light, you can see that that's not good contrast for a type-based element. So we'll come down right there and add that as a custom color as well. We're also going to have a kind of like an expand button right here to the right of it. So we're just going to make something custom real quick with this. So we're going to take our, there's different ways we can approach it. I'm going to use the pen tool initially here, and I'm just going to hold left click, hold shift to get a 45-degree angle, and then keep holding shift the whole time. And then you wait until you see that guide show up so that you have a perfect sort of like a half triangle or unclosed triangle. And then we can come here at the center with a second shape facing that way. So now we have like a little bit of an arrow, and we may very well change this up. Let's go ahead and increase the size here to 2. All right. And this whole thing will be at a 45-degree angle. So hold shift and then rotate it. And then we're going to duplicate it. First, we can group that. So Control G to group. By the way, we see our layers over here. So that's group 1. We'll duplicate it. And this time we're holding shift, and we're just going to reverse it that way. All right. Actually, what we should do first is make this into a component. There we go. Then we could just duplicate this, hold shift, and then if we want to change up like the length of the arrow, for instance, we only have to change it in one place. For now, before I do that, we're going to encase it. And you don't necessarily have to do this. I'm just doing this for my own subjective preferences. We're encasing it in kind of like a circular container. So let's get out of there. Let's get out here, and we're going to put it beneath both of them, and then we're going to give it a fill color, something around there, maybe a little bit lighter. So we'll add that. That is D4E BF5. Boy, that was not a good one. I just woke up literally like 20 minutes ago. All right, so we're going to bring these in a little bit closer. So I'm going to edit the master component here, and we're just going to bring this in, yeah, right around there. All right, so that looks better to me. Let's see how big everything is. Oh, by the way, the color, let's see here. Let's take this one, and I don't like that gray necessarily. Let's go back to this color perhaps. Maybe make it a little bit darker. There we go. I'll add that too. All right, that's actually looking pretty good. I want to take all 3 of these, group them, and then position it right there in the center. Enough space between those elements. And I'm pretty happy with that. All right, so now let's take the artboard, Control D to duplicate it. And this time we're going to design for what happens after a person clicks on this. All right, so I'm going to take this container here, Alt, and drag it like that down. Yeah, right around there. We can always adjust it after. We'll take everything and then hold Shift to deselect the background and then push this up holding Shift. All right. Then we're going to list out the cart items. All right, so for ours, we're going to put in maybe a course called SAS Fundamentals. Fortunately, it has the color I already want this to be. I want this to be blue over here, but I don't want it to be the same size as the labels and the price, simply because that takes away from the visual hierarchy. The most important aspect is the fact that it's a label and the primary price over here, and then secondary to that in terms of importance are the actual items themselves. So we're going to use scale this way to reinforce that visual hierarchy. We're going to duplicate this. Maybe there's a description for this. Not when it comes to cart views, there's not always a description. I'm deciding to add one. We're going to say get sassy in this SAS course. There. All right. So once again, we have an issue of visual hierarchy between these two elements. We're going to change two things about them in this case. We're going to scale it down and also change up the color. So let's try this. It's actually not too bad. I may want to make this slightly larger. All right, that actually looks pretty good. Initially, I think I was going to go for something more around here. I think I'll do that. Yeah, we'll go right around there. Okay, and then finally, we'll have a price associated with that individual item. So I'll just say this is 55, and then we'll put it over here. And these could be around the same size over here, but I am going to change the color. Yeah, we'll just use the same color here. All right. This is looking pretty decent. I'm still experimenting, thinking about the size here. So I'm making it a little bit smaller. I'm being real picky about this. Yeah, I think this is good. So now we can take these three elements and then use the repeat grid tool, and we'll just show two of these. Now, or two more rather. Now, right here, they seem real cluttered. We need more white space in there. So we'll select this repeated grid element and just pull these down away from each other so they have room to breathe. And that's pretty good. So actually, I like this. And there we go. All right. So now if we go to prototype mode, if you wanted to do this, we'll take the button, we'll bring it over there. The latest Adobe XD update, usually there was a panel that shows up with the properties, but now it's over here. So now we could just do a tap-based auto animate transition. You can change these. Maybe we'll just do like 0.8 seconds and then hit play. There. I'm not going to worry about making these animate how we intend to animate them in with HTML and CSS, but that is good for now. All right, so let's start with the HTML and CSS process. All right, so here I am inside of Visual Studio Code, free code editor from Microsoft. We're going to do Scene.js. This is just an empty folder that I created, and we're going to open that up. As you can see, there are no files in here. So let's get started. Index.html. We're going to hit exclamation point enter for our Emmet abbreviation for quick HTML boilerplate. We're going to put in a link going to a CSS folder, main.css. Let's create that real quick. A CSS folder and a main. We're going to use a SAS file. And momentarily, this should show up for watching. There it goes. Watch SAS. This is the live SAS compilation extension or the plugin right down here. So type in live SaaS, install that, and also live server. We're going to use that as well. All right, so we're going to click watch SaaS. And then we're going to go back to our index.html and start doing the actual HTML that's necessary to make this, where are you at? There we go, a reality here. So we're not going to create the HTML elements just for this. We're going to do it right now for this. And our goal is to get this showing up in the browser as close as possible to what this looks like. Then after that, we'll use CSS and JavaScript to make this a functional thing, similar to the prototype. All right, so let's get started. So first, we have to ask ourselves, what element should we begin with? And that would be, if we come back here, sorry, this containing element right here. All right, so we can use a div container. I'm going to be using Emmet abbreviations. As you can see, this is an Emmet abbreviation. I did a quick crash course on that. It's not a long video on how to use various Emmet abbreviations to make your HTML writing process faster. So we can just hit enter and that does that for us. After that, we're going to have our three elements, our three type-based elements. So we have my cart. Oh, this isn't type-based. It's just obviously an icon. And then we have another type-based element. So we're just going to type in H1 and we're going to say my cart. Again, this is an Emmet abbreviation. We're not hitting enter just yet. Plus, that means it's going to be a child sibling element. And then we're going to do an image for that. And then we'll do, let's put this here, brackets for an attribute of source equals. That's going to be in images expand.svg. We'll add that momentarily, that file. And then we'll also add another paragraph with a class of price with 455 inside of it. Hit enter. Oh, it didn't add my 455. All right. So alt, you should always also have an alt attribute. We'll just say expand cart. There we go. Okay, so now before we even begin, let's add this this expand graphic. So let's create an images folder. We'll go back to our Adobe XD. We'll come back here with it selected. Oh, first let's just change the name so we don't have to rename it in Visual Studio Code. We'll rename this to expand, and that's going to be the name it uses. So we'll come back here, export selected as a SVG in this folder right here, CSS, no, images, select it, export it, and we're good to go. Okay, so we'll save this, and at this point in time, we can right click on our index.html, open with live server. That's the live server extension. And that's our ugly HTML so far without any CSS. So let's keep on writing the HTML though. And then we'll get to the CSS. So now our attention in terms of writing the HTML elements is shifted towards this area, because now we already did this stuff, but beneath this, inside of the div container, we need this stuff here. All right, so we're going to have, and we normally wouldn't have to have this containing element if we weren't going to do something specific with JavaScript and the animation of it. But I want the actual elements right here to be all encased inside of a block here, so a div element, because we'll be able to reference that if we want to and make the whole thing, all three come in at once if we want or not. So we're going to say a div class info. Inside of there, each one of them are going to have their own containers as well, each item. So we'll just call that item. Inside of here, we'll have a block, a div block or a containing element for these two items right here. Okay, so we'll just call that, I think we're going to call that description. So description, and then inside of there we'll have, we'll make the top one a link. So ahref, this is going nowhere. Inside of it, we're going to specify Sass fundamentals. And then outside of this, we're going to say paragraph, get sassy in this Sass course. There we go. That is so bad. And then after the description, we're going to say with a class of sub price, I guess we'll call it, for $55. So now we could take our item and paste it. So now we have 3 items. And that is all we need for the HTML. All right, so that's the power of CSS, because we're going to go from this to something very close to this. All right, so now let's do the HTML, or CSS rather. So our first element is always, for me, is just going to be the body element. We're going to specify just a couple things to get it up and running. So the body tag, I'm going to make this slightly bigger for everybody to see. So I hit Control B, by the way, to get rid of that sidebar. We're going to put margin 0. We're going to put height 100 viewport height here, and the background is going to be the color code that we're going to grab real quickly from here. There we go. And if we save this, we'll see right away it updates. Okay. After that, we want to center this this container that we're going to have here vertically and horizontally as we have here. Okay, so to do that, we'll just use display grid, and we're going to say justify items center as long as align items center. And then if we save this, we'll see it's now centered, but still looks very off. So we'll fix that. Font family is going to be that Nunito font. And then we're going to import that, and this is a Google Fonts font. There we go. So I'm using the weights of 400 and 700. I don't think we even use a bold version anyway, so technically we don't need that. We'll take that off. There we go. All right, there we go. And we have our font now all ready to rock. Awesome. So now let's reference our container. All right, so inside of here, the container is going to be background white. The width we'll say is 50%. The padding we'll say is 2 EM on the inside. Border radius is going to be 10 pixels. And let's just see what happens here. All right, so that's it so far. Not bad, looks a lot better. I'm going to set a height on this. Normally you wouldn't do that, but just for this demo, I'm doing it just so that we can animate the height going from this 5% or so element. And you need to set a height on that, and unfortunately for that to work the way we want it to work. So you'll see how that works here momentarily. Inside of container, we're going to have our H1, our image, and the price. So those are the 3 things that show up initially. And we're going to say display inline block and margin 0. All right, so now they're all here on the same row. All right, and then we're going to reference real quickly our price. We need to float that right, so that pushes it way over here where it needs to be. Font size we'll say is 1.7 EM, and the color is that blue color. And I think it was somewhere similar to 008 BF5. So now that's looking good and pretty consistent with this over here. All right, continuing on, we have our image. Let's change the cursor to pointer. Margin left is going to be 10 pixels, so we're pushing that image, the expand image, away by 10 pixels. And then width, we're going to make it smaller than the default size. We're going to make it 28 pixels right there. Now it's looking pretty solid. All right, so we're going to add info, but first, we're not going to add the property yet because it's going to be display none. So if we do it now, just to show you, it's going to look like it should be right now by default before somebody clicks on this expand button. But we want to see what it looks like in its final state while we're doing the CSS naturally. So there we go, brought it back. Okay, so coming outside of here, we're going to reference the HTML element of item so that we can start getting this ready to rock. So we're almost done, by the way, with the CSS portion. So we're going to say margin 2em on the top and bottom and 0. That's going to push things away from each other. Like there it is right here and here. We're also going to specify a display grid. And we're going to say grid template columns is the 75%. So this is the column right here that holds the name of the purchased element and the description. And then we're going to say auto for the rest, which is just the price of that element. And then we're going to say the link in here, text decoration is none. Color is this color up here. Normally you would use variables, but I'm just being lazy right now. And then we're going to say font size 1.3 em. So far, let's save it and look at it. Looking close. Still not right though. And then we're going to do sub price. And we're going to say text align right, font size 1.2 em. And then our description, paragraph, we'll say margin 0. You probably want to use rem units, by the way, for that as well. But this is it here. I think we colored this differently, but I'm still fine with this. If we removed the height here, where are we at? This, you'd see it would contain everything, but I'm not too concerned about that because we want this effect to work. So initially, that's what we have, and then we're going to bring back our display none. There. So that's the starting point. All right, so now let's do the JavaScript. Okay, so we need to import the JavaScript. All right, so I'm going to paste that right here. This is a CDN that we're using. You can use for more robust development environment, npm install to do this. To find that out, you may have seen this initially where I had this Scene.js. I was at the complete wrong side. I didn't realize it at first. And this is not what you want, by the way. If you type in Scene.js, that's where you go first, and that's why I went there. But we want this element right here, or this link rather. So this is going to tell you, this is going to show you the examples and stuff. I already went over this, but this is where you grab that right here. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, we're going to have script tags here. All right, and we are going to, let's see, I think, yeah, we'll start just by showing you how to do something real simple. That's always the best way to learn something. What if we want this just to fade in? You know, how would we do that with using Scene.js? All right, so we're going to create a scene variable and create a new instance of it, new scene. And we open up here an object. All right, so we're going to specify the selector. All right, so we wrap this in quotes, and our selector is container class. All right, because that's the thing we want to fade in. That's containing everything here. All right, then we open this up in an array of objects, and each object is your particular transformation that you want to make. So inside of here in this object, the properties start to go. So we're going to have transform. Yeah, let's say we want to fade it in, but also make it grow. So we'll say scale 0.7, and then the opacity will be 0. So that's the first step. And then we'll put a comma for the next object. And this will be transform scale to its default size of 1 and also opacity 1 right there. All right. So after this object right here, which begins at this point, we're going to put in a comma, and then we have another object which contains our options. All right. So We can specify a duration right here. We can specify an easing through scene.ease in out. This is in their API documentation, by the way. And then selector true. All right. You can also put something like, you can look at the API for this, but like for instance, iteration count, not iteration count. There we go. We can make that infinite if we want it to loop. But again, you could check out the API for that. Let's go ahead and save that. But also at the end, if we want it to play right away, we just put in play CSS. So now, with any luck, let's refresh. And there we go. Very simple stuff. Okay. Now, really, if this is all you wanted, you wouldn't use Scene.js for this. You would use regular CSS animations because it's so simple. The utility in using something like GSAP or this Scene.js is when you want more complex animations, of course. So let's go ahead and add a click-based animation when somebody clicks this, and we'll make some interesting things happen. All right. So first, we're going to grab our expand, and we can see we don't have an ID on that. So I think the ID that we need for that to be is, yeah, I gave it an ID of CTA for call to action. All right. And now let's go ahead and get that here. So at the top, I'm just going to put var CTA equals document.get element by ID CTA. All right. All right. So over here, we're going to listen for a click event. All right, so that will be CTA dot add event listener. It's going to be click. You could be hover or whatever if you want, or mouse over. There's a bunch of them. And inside of here, we're going to have our play CSS. But first, we need to create the actual animation. So we're going to leave this empty for now. Future play CSS. There we go. All right. So in here, we're going to add our first one. So we're going to call this scene 2. New scene. I hate when I do that. There we go. And inside of here, the way we structured this up here is slightly different than the way we're going to structure this one. And you'll see how. So first we have our selector like normally. This is an ID of the CTA in reference to the image. So I want to have the image animate. So that's why we're selecting it here first. So we'll say we'll want it to grow and then shrink real fast when somebody clicks it. I mean, I probably normally wouldn't do that, but just to show you multi-step animations here. So this is our first selector, and we can have multiple selectors that are part of the same scene. So inside of here, we're going to put in an object. Oh, we already did. Sorry about that. We're going to specify this right here where it says 0, and that's our starting point. So this is already a little bit different than how we structured this over here. This right here is basically a time. So it's kind of like a timeline that you can create through your objects. So we'll say transform. By the way, because transform accepts multiple values like scale and translate and such, we could open that up even into an object as well and say scale 1. All right. What's also put right here a comma. So that's the first step of this animation for our CTA element. Then we'll say maybe at point 3, we'll have a transform of scale 3. So it's going to increase by 3 times the size. Let's just copy all this right here. And we'll say by like 0.5, we'll transform scale back to 1. Okay, so right here, what we can already do is come back down and we can say scene2.play CSS. And this is on click only. Oh, and it, of course, is not working. Oh, and that's probably because we haven't added any options. Oops. All right, so I'm just going to paste in the options I have off screen, and this will go right after this final closing object. All right, so we have easing, scene ease in and out. We already saw that. Fill mode, forwards. I don't even think we need to do that. We can remove that. And then selector true. Let's see if it works now. There we go. So you need to have those options in order for this to work. Okay. Again, I probably wouldn't do that normally, but again, I just wanted to find some way to have multiple animations. So we don't yet have multiple or multi-step animations. We only have this right here. So let's say after that we want to specify our container, which is the white container, and we want to make it grow. So what we'll do is put a comma here, and then our next selector is the container element, and then we will open this up here, and then we're going to say at 0.4. So these all work in conjunction with each other. So if you wanted the animations that you're about to specify to take place at the same time as this animation, as this starts, to grow, that button, you would specify 0 here as well. But let's just say we want it to start almost at the tail end when it's scaling back down. So we'll put 0.4. Again, a lot of this is subjective and it's up to you. So we're going to say transform. Again, we could open it up in brackets like this or as an object. Or we could just do what you normally would do, just scale 1. All right, and then we'll say height. We're going from 5%, which is what we specified in the CSS, and opacity 1, right? So this is what we're going from, and then we're going to, we'll say it lasts at like from 0.4 to 0.7. The longer you make this here, the longer this animation will take place, if that makes sense. Let's put a cool in there. And then we're going to go to height, we'll say 60%. And then we'll say opacity 1 as well. Now the opacity 1, I had to add this when I was doing this test project before recording because it was making the opacity 0 for some reason. So I think we could probably get away with even removing that one right there. So there we go. Isn't that cool? And you can reverse this animation, so we'll do that as well. All right, now let's have a third and final, well, it's not going to be final yet. I think we're going to have 2 more different selectors. So let's put a comma after that, and then let's create a new one for info, which contains, I think it's the parent container of all the items. Yeah, if we look up in the HTML, we'll see info is right here, and then we have our items inside. So for info, we're going to say at 0.7, so right after it grows, we're going to display block, because remember this element by default in CSS when a site loads is display none. And then we're going to make this opacity 0 though, and then that will make it fade in. So we're going to make this kind of like a longer fade in so we're going to say 0.7 to 1.5, and we're going to say opacity 1. There. All right, so then after that, well, let's first just check this out. And this could be completely fine if you wanted to, but just to show you more of what you can do with Scene.js, we're going to add one final element over here, and it's slightly different. So we're going to say item for our next selector, and what we're going to do is pass in a function here that's going to send the index. All right, so if we console log our index and hit Control-Shift-I, you can see right away it's already loaded 0, 1, 2 because we have, in terms of our selector or item selector, we have 3 items, so it starts at 0. And this allows you to do some interesting things. So we return, and then we just start writing out our normal animations in this fashion. So at 0, we'll say opacity is going to be 0. And again, this is for each item. We're going to have each item come in sequentially, kind of like a sequence animation or a multi-step animation. So at 0.5, we'll say opacity is 1. And then we'll also put in options at over here. This is our options. And again, it's just added right after these. We don't add it down here at the end or anything. And then we put delay. We could pass in our index and multiply it maybe by 0.5. All right, so now when we click this, they come in more based on kind of like a sequence animation. All right, very, very, very cool. Okay, so finally, let's do this so that we can structure this so that when we click this up here again, it'll reverse the animations. All right, so to do that, we're going to write an if statement. If scene2.getDirection, and that's something that you have access to from the API docs. Real quickly, let me show you where that's at. The API documentation. You click that, and they have a bunch. So for instance, you can see we're using get direction already right here. It's going to show you how to use it. So you can do a bunch of cool stuff here. Get direction is normal, and that's the default direction if you don't specify it in your options. If it's normal, then we're just going to say scene2.play CSS. So if it's normal, that means like when it hasn't been expanded yet. And then we're going to, right after that, scene2 set direction reverse. All right, so then we'll say else, and we'll say scene2.play CSS just the same way. And then we'll say scene2 set direction normal. So now if we, let's get rid of that. So now if we save that, click it again, there we go. Now what if, for instance, you didn't want to this button to like do that initial animation? You could do other things. For instance, if you look in the API document, you can remove an item from a scene. So items, of course, are these things. These are referred to as items. So you could even, for instance, type in scene2.remove item, and then it's a reference just to the selector name. In this case, it would be the CTA button. So now at the end of the animation, that won't grow up anymore like that. So you could do different things like that, and it's just a matter of experimenting and looking what the API documents have, and of course looking at their examples that they have as well right here, and you could see them all right here. And these are all hosted on CodePen. All right, very cool. All right, so hopefully you found that enjoyable, and if you perhaps like Scene.js over GSAP, then go ahead and use it. All right, make sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.